Hello there. I've got to get through 2 sketchbooks. There's quite a lot to get through, so feel free to put it on 1.25 if you haven't done so already. Some noises you'll hear will be food being prepared, so I'm sorry about that, but I've got to get this video done. And on the first page of this sketchbook, you will see that there are some notes. This wouldn't have been done at the very beginning, it would have been during the course of the sketchbook. I'd have probably gone back to this page because I was aware that we had to do these critical sort of essay, and it just occurred to me how good it would be to just go through the work and look at some of these symbols that I was using. Eyes were turning up, profiles, concentric circles. Why was that? And exactly what did it mean? I did have notions and things, but to sort of look carefully and build up an idea of what was being sort of codified was very worthwhile. And this was what I'd really got straight on with at the beginning of January, so right at the beginning of the year. I bought myself some new printing inks. The other stuff were getting claggy and not very nice to use, and I wanted to do the best I could for this term in some ways, and new inks were required. And these were Schmink water-soluble inks, and performed very well actually. Here's the size of the roller I was using, which you can see. I just rolled that out, checking on the viscosity and just how dense the black was, the surface quality of the ink as well. You see I'm trying out edges of the roller and trying the roller out as well as the ink in a way. And here I sort of realised that the surface qualities and denseness matched that of the pens I had as well, and so I've used pen to kind of bring out this sort of circular shape, which was just being hinted at from the experimentation and things. After that, I was also thinking about would charcoal work in with it, and here I'm not doing it in this sketchbook, but I am playing with water as well, and here's water's being scattered across the surface whilst the ink is still wet, because when it dries it's water soluble, so it's quite good. And here is moving on to Indian ink, and with the Indian ink I'm looking at the Chinese sort of brushwork. Worth mentioning that I did go to China and just was there for 3 weeks or something, and I did get some tuition from a professor over there on brush painting, and this is the page which I rather like because it reminds me of some of the pottery that I've seen, and it has these really quite strange marks, not as elegant as some of the ones we sort of tend to see perhaps over here. And whereas I find them quite beautiful at times, I think some people find them quite ugly, but I really rather enjoy playing with the Chinese inks and the brushes, and I'm using a spray to get that sort of splatter effect. And I've come to the centre of the sketchbook here, and obviously sort of thought to myself, I'll try the Rorschach test approach, and it's a bit like a giraffe's head, and I wasn't thinking that I was going to start exploring Rorschach as such, but of course it did stick as an idea in the end, because it was a pretty obvious idea to do. And if I just show that in, you can see this line work, a little bit of hatching and everything like that, trying to coax out the image a little bit more, and pretty good fun. And I've got a book here which is Damien Searle's book. If you're interested in finding out about Rorschach's actual life and character and the psychiatry of the time, and just generally what was happening with him, it's quite interesting, sort of good sort of biography in a way, dealing with things. But I suppose I wouldn't recommend it if you wanted to look at lots of the other associations like Miro, Ernst, hardly sort of touched on really. So the brush I had, which was a bit of a novelty to play with because I hadn't used it. It was a 5-strand brush, and I played with that, and it was obviously a bit like these stave pens that musicians would use. Then we have the charcoal. The charcoal is quite hard. It's homemade stuff along with other stuff which is quite soft. And this variety, it's not necessarily the sort of thing you want to buy, but I personally rather like having the choice of using it. So I'm experimenting with those different sort of types there. For fun, here I'm adding a bit of water. You can see the brushwork in here, and there's water coming in which densifies the charcoal into quite a dark sort of shape. And these I find these rather nice and delicious, and you enter into another world. Rather like a scientist would if you're looking through a microscope. And here actually I would say there's an example of where I feel I can enter into a world with this one. You've got the statuary, the sort of bush, the trees in the background, the tombstone at the front, gravestone, maybe. And then on this one here, sort of you're playing with the marks and seeing something feather-like and bird-like, then teasing that out. So that's the small sketchbook. This one's a little bit unwieldy. It's A3, and as you can see, I tend to put envelopes in at the beginning so that I can tuck things in to remind me of what's going on, perhaps, or perhaps if there's something I want to use. And this is black acrylic, where at times I'm using rollers, sometimes I'm using brushes and what have you. And at this point I'm not using a huge amount of water because one of my purposes was to try and get in on using plenty of water. But I am using a tool which is a wood graining tool which gives these absolutely wonderful marks which can give you a wood graining effect. But of course I'm interested in the striations and the lines and qualities and interest in surface that you have. Surface is so important and interesting in my thinking. And here you've got a card disc being used here, so that's how we're doing things. Quite an iconic image, I realised in the end. I came back to the sketchbook and sort of was flipping through, and this one just stood out as something complete. This here is another card stencil, and it comes off the end of a roll of material. So you have tubes, you have an end bit of card, got all the details on it, who made it and what have you. When that comes off, you've got the moonstone, which I had mentioned. I've talked about the moonstone. There's an illustration of the moonstone, which you would have probably seen by now, I would have thought. And very beautiful they are. And here you see that moonstone-y type stencil in place here, and over here just a disc being used. And again, if I come in closely, you'll see it's quite rich in terms of surface. And one of the concerns about having to submit things digitally is you just don't feel people don't necessarily appreciate that, but it seems to come across quite well on the screen sometimes, this sort of thing. So here we've got a roller, which is giving me the essential mark as I'm working away with the acrylic, and it's got a bit of an architectural structure to it. I can imagine sort of making a pretty decent folly out of those sorts of images. And let's see, page 18. So we're up to this where the acrylic is now dilute, and I'm using a tool which is a little bit different. It's actually, so there's the wood grading tool, but you'll start to see that there are other marks creeping in. If I take you in closer to that one, and so these kind of marks here, and it's really quite wonderful. This is a finely toothed piece of plastic, and scraping through it reveals these marks in sort of most unlikely media. This, for example, is charcoal. It's dry charcoal, And if I bring that in, just look at that. That tool is still managing to give a very, very good striation. I use the word striation, but in fact, I was talking to Robert Mackenzie, a biologist who's sort of helped me with the course from time to time. We're good friends, and he was talking to me about this idea of filaments of matter, and this is something that's quite wonderful, of course, from my point of view, because we're looking at the idea of interconnectedness and looking at ways of using line, fluidity of line rhythm, ideas of vibration and energy. And then we're talking about this filaments of matter. And, these are long strings of dark matter. And only the other day I came across the thing saying how they'd found that they'd measured one that was 50 million light years long. And that's pretty mind-boggling, really. And they are also microscopic. So quite extraordinary things. And they're composed of matter that we are made from. Everything is made from the matter within these sort of filaments of matter. This is done by coming across a piece of charcoal that I've made, which was knobbly, had a little bit sticking out of it, and you could roller it over the surface and create these marks. I wouldn't say that necessarily arrived at anything particularly, but it was interesting. And more exploratory pieces in charcoal. I think I'm using water again, a little bit over on this side, over here. And see some variation of mark being put in there. And this now is starting to move into Indian ink. Change of medium, change of feel, way things work, really respond to the materials differently. And quantum physics returned really to the scene as I'm kind of reflecting on things and thinking about our various ideas. And we can see that that idea comes out quite strongly in a moment. This is just really more of the same. I think. So go through splattering with a fine line tool going through, the idea of a bit of a lonely planet idea there. And this, I think, will be quite a graphic representation of that idea of wave and particle, both quite striking in their own way, I think. Sorry, got some stuff in the way here. And that's the tool being used for creating the stripe ideas, sort of hatching sort of effect, and then turning that on the end, and then the tool being used, just pressing on here, so it's sort of wave and particle. Order out of chaos. Well, plenty of need for that. And so I had a grid, a metal grid, and I thought it would be fun to just have a go with using that as a stencil to try and give some kind of structure against the chaos here. Much as I love chaos, it's nice to play one thing against another. And of course, the use of the card stencil, hatching, cross-hatching. Really, this is from looking at the digital works and finding these tools which gave you this sort of cross-hatch effect. I love, I want to go back to doing some, and so this is me getting in here to do that with a pen, rotary pen. This here is quink ink, and using a spray, playing around with that and letting the colour sort of come out, the staining come out of that. And Quink ink was something I'd used when I was a very, very young student. And I found a bottle in the CSM's shop and I thought, fantastic, I must have a go at this. And so here we are with the Quink ink again, playing out the colours. And I used a little bit of colour pencil to try and tease the colours, water-soluble colour pencil, just to give it a little bit of a boost. And that was a stencil on top and working around. This is a stencil laid on top again, but this time left, pushed into the wet and left overnight, come back in the morning, there it is. And I'm just going to go then back to these because this is where different ideas are coming through in a way. This is the stencil laid on top and working around with hatched coloured pencil lines. And here, this is it underneath the page, so frottage style, silhouettes being used and what have you. So, and the idea here is we're all together facing the climate and ecology concerns, and this idea of birds, bird-headed human beings, or birds dressed like us. It's all a bit of fun, and at the same time it's trying to make a bit of a serious point. And the last page is the sort of, because of working with silhouettes a few times, I thought, well, I think I'll do a bit of looking up, looking down, looking straight out, 5 finger exercises basically, a bit of cartoon, a couple of doodles, and it's the sort of thing I like to do in a sketchbook from time to time, if it's in contrast to stuff. So that's it. So thank you very much, and I'll leave you to it. Thank you very much. Bye.